What's up, everybody? We're live again. And guess what we got this time? We got vulnerabilities and 0 day.
You keep using the word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
What? What does that mean? I don't know. But we'll get to it coming up on OT Exposed Raw. That's right. Something about 0 days and using that word wrong. So we're going to talk about that. We got a lot of things to talk about. So let's go ahead and bring up Pascal. I've already been on the show so many times, I don't even know how to introduce him anymore. Something about a fresh haircut and some Dutch accent, Dutch oven. I don't know, but let's bring him on.
Just say, hey, you. Get into the picture, right?
That's no fun.
It's good. It's good to be back, though, again. And once again, I'm from an undisclosed location, on site with a customer, and I wore this t-shirt just for this episode, right? I could say it's only 0 days to this episode right now. Would that be the good way? Would that be the
0 days? Did you say 0 days?
You keep using the word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
Yeah, I think we're going to get to the bottom of that, but I don't think most people know what a 0 day actually is.
We'll talk about that. And by the way, so speaking of attire, and I by the way, I still think you're bullshitting. I think that you are out somewhere on vacation, not doing anything, just to get out of work because all you want to do is this show. But that's okay.
I found a place that has more whiteboards than my own dungeon does, so I'm happy here. I think I'm going to stay a little bit longer.
Well, as long as you're not coming down to Texas, we're happy. All right, moving right along. So, all right, since we are talking about vulnerabilities and 0 days, I got my Hack the Planet shirt on, and I got my my black hat. My black DEF CON hat on, and Donkey Kong in the background. I don't know how that fits in at all, but it just seemed like really cool. I want to try to have a different video. It is. It was the first. I want to have a different video game back there every week. So anyway, let's bring on our guest this week. So our guest this week has a name so cool and so unique, it could probably have its own Adam McKay movie. We're going to bring on Ron Brash.
Hey there.
What's up, Ron? So just to clear that up, so people don't know what I'm talking about. So Adam McKay is the guy who produced, or I guess one of the main producers of like the Ricky Bobby story, Talladega Nights, and I guess what's the brother-in-laws or something like that. And then my favorite, Anchorman, Ron Burgundy. And so your name is just like Ron Brash, Canadian hacker. I'm kind of picturing like this David Lightman meets Ricky Bobby, kind of played by like Steve Carell or Luke Wilson or something like that.
Well, if you're not first, you're last, bud.
Yeah, there you go. See, so if you're not pwned, you're owned. Anyway, if you're not pwning, you're pwned, or something like that. So this week, man, in the news we have. I'm not. If we can help it, we're not going to talk about Colonial this week because it's about talked out, and so I think you do have an alcoholic beverage there. But so first, let's talk about JBS because we have a little update, and yet again, somebody paid the ransom. $11 million is what they paid, right? So what does that signal to you guys? And I'm not going to make moral judgments in this area because we've already talked this out and we have our opinions. But what they paid, and I remember what you said on our team's chat, Pascal. So what do you guys make of this?
Like you said, no judgment, right? Every company has to decide this for themselves. But I think we're setting a trend. I would argue pretty soon we'll see a service that says, hey, if you're in this line of business, and this is your risk exposure. You're likely to get a piece of ransomware, and you're likely going to be paying anywhere between $5 and $11 million. So guess what? I think your budget for your cybersecurity effort should be somewhere between $5 and $11 million. So I think this is all helping towards that. Oh, should I call it a goal, or should I call it a 0 day? I don't know.
I think that's a good point, in that these ransoms are really sort of establishing, for better or for worse, right? Are sort of establishing a budget for cybersecurity.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, ransomwares generally are I'll step back for a second. Ransomwares are the consequence of a series of things that you've done wrong, right? So it's like broken window syndrome in a neighborhood. So if you leave the window broken, you wind up with a second window broken. So if you leave one piece of graffiti, you wind up with more graffiti. And then you wind up with a derelict neighborhood. Well, that derelict neighborhood is your business, and it's being ransomed. And that's generally, if you look at kind of the left to the right of everything going on, ransomware is the consequence of you not spending a dime for decades.
There you go. Yep.
Yeah, and I kind of also look at ransomware as the most visible thing that can happen to you using the easiest attack vectors. So if you have this many companies, and I think Rob Lee had quoted himself about, like, what was it, 15,000 ransomware attacks last year. I don't remember when it was. Either way, that's the number I believe he gave. And so if you have that many ransomware attacks happening, then and those are the most visible exposures with the using the easiest, most low-hanging fruit attack vectors. What other kind of dirty laundry is lurking around there when they're intentfully trying to be hidden? And so that's the concerning part for me.
Absolutely.
The other thing too is, so JBS paid $11 million, right? The other company paid, what was it? 5 million, 9 million, 4 million? I don't know.
5 million,
almost
4.3, 4.6.
So, this brings up two thoughts. Either A, America values its meat more than it does its gas. I'm sure there's a cow fart joke in there somewhere. Or the JBS CEO is a terrible negotiator by comparison. Either way, something to be said there, that we're willing to pay more for meat than for our petro.
Maybe it's the type of attack, right? I don't know, but the JBS was the dual approach, where they stole the data and then encrypted it and said, hey, even if you're going from backups, guess what? The joke's still on you, because we're gonna put your data out there on the dark web. So I'm not sure that Colonial drink. I'm not sure if Colonial drink.
We're going to leave it up there double time.
Had that same attack, but that might be where the difference in payment is, right?
It could be. So that's actually a good point, Pascal, because if you're looking at like the cheese industry, you have one company making all the cheese, but the different orders are different from each other. So let's say pizza company A and pizza company B are ordering mozzarella. They're two different price points that have been negotiated. And also one might have more cellulose than the other, and they're getting it for cheaper, and it tastes the same at the end of the day. And you don't want your competitor to know that, because that's a cost advantage for them. And it's your secret sauce is the cheese maker. So potentially, right, Pipeline is just a logistics company. You know what the price is going to be from point A to point B for the most part. But when you're talking about meat, maybe that's not true. And I don't know anything about the meat industry other than the fact that it needs to be kept cold and you need to track that from start to finish. But I'm suspecting that there might also be some idiosyncrasies there with who's actually consuming the meat from JBS, and that might be part of it too. Or there's some dirty laundry about meat that we shouldn't know.
That's an excellent point. Who knows what they dug up?
I don't want to know.
You see this email that you sent a couple years ago? You don't want to go public? Yep, that might be the difference right there.
Could be.
Well, I know that here in Texas, you're taking my meat, you're taking my gas and my oil, and I don't care. I would not do it for posterity or the economy or the global. I would just pay the ransom, because you don't mess with my meat or my oil and gas. So that's just me.
Take your jabs.
I'm not really, one of the things I had to talk about on here was, the fact that, this whole double extortion thing. And I don't really care about that so much as I do. I just want to, before we move on, I do want to mention that one thought I had was, in addition to the ransomware being kind of the most visible in the the lowest hanging fruit is, I think that one of the things that you're definitely seeing in that there's a differentiator between the ransomware and an actual breach involving data theft, right? So in ransomware, it's not the sort of breach to where they're getting in, they're taking stuff, or at least it wasn't. But then you have the other type of breach where they get in and they're stealing data, they're stealing things. And one thing I was seeing is that at first, ransomware breaches are more prevalent where people have more money, and now we're looking at like oil and gas and manufacturing because it's big game hunting and the whole goal is to get money, right? Whereas the other strategy, you're breaching a system to steal private data, sensitive data, credit card data, whatever, and then you sell that, right? It's two different money-making strategies. Not even talking about wartime strategies. This is just criminal activity. But now, because they do have this double extortion model to where they're going to breach you, set ransomware, and then hold it for ransom for payment, or steal your data and hold the data hostage and say, well, if you don't pay, we're going to release it to everybody. So anyway, just an interesting model. I think it's an interesting paradigm shift from the way that we used to think about breaches, which is, they're going to break in, steal credit card data, financials, and now it's like, now it's ransomware, and now it's both, right?
And I'll add one more piece there. So if you're in an industry that requires quality information, so if you're doing pulp and paper, you need to have all of the quality information on that roll of paper ready before you can sell the roll of paper because it's contractually agreed. So if you don't have that information, everything that you made is now lost as well. So you'd have to throw away all of that as a write-off. That could also kick into this ransomware. Everyone thinks about data or just disruption, but it's also all the things I promised to sell or to give that I'm responsible for. So that there is more. It is a pretty concise topic. And there's lots of externalities that everyone forgets.
You're using big words I don't understand. All right.
We're gonna cut those out, or wait, we're live.
Well, this is uncut. We can't do it.
Is this a demonstration of Canadian education being better than American?
Absolutely, but I don't think there's a question about that right now. All right, so just look at me and Pascal. Or Pascal wasn't educated in America, were you? You were educated in
somewhere in Europe, I think, where they still have dragons.
Yeah,
perfect.
Castles and dragons. Dragons. All right. One last thing that I do want to mention before we move on to the fun stuff, for the whole reason we got Ron on here. We did not bring Ron on the show to talk about news and boring stuff like malware. We brought Ron on because he is the ICS vulnerability researcher extraordinaire, and we're going to get to that. But I do want to mention real quick one last time is that a little update on Colonial is that they did recover. So the U.S. Justice Department did recover $2.3 million in cryptocurrency from DarkSide. So what's interesting there is a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel, right? You can only hope the same as for Revel, right? Revel were the ones that created the ransomware, or at least perpetrated the attack on JBS. So at least there's a little bit of retribution, a little bit of justice being served. So
two things on that though. Where does that money go? Because I would imagine that Colonial got their money back from the insurance. Drink, by the way, got their money back from the insurance. So who's going to get the 2.3 million? Is that going to go back to the insurance? Is the finders keepers rule in place there? And secondly, how did they trace this money? Because I was in the understanding that cryptocurrency was untraceable, or at least very hard to trace.
It's GOV magic.
This one was supposedly in a hot wallet, which is a big no-no for anyone anyway. So that there's a lot of interesting, I don't know what you want to call them, but there's a lot of false signaling and flagging in the releases from the government. So I wouldn't believe any of it, but it was found in a hot wallet, which kind of says a few things that no proper organization would have done that.
Yeah. It's why leave it there? You got it, and you know you're hot on the trail by the government. Get out now.
Yeah, but I don't know if you saw my post on LinkedIn with Maggie. We were calling it the Brashian cyber tax recovery formula. So if you do so the government, what they should do to you is take the ransomware that you paid, times that by 3, and then for everything that they get, like for example, that additional 2.3 million, the government gets it all, and that's the consequence of you paying. So it hurts more to not do something than it does to pay it, and that there should be like a consequence there. And then the government, I mean, it generally just does it to feed itself. who knows what the money on seizures goes to, but they could use that to fund
Just watch
more
Super
groups.
Troopers. Watch
And,
Super Troopers. It explains it all.
We're talking Canadian government now, right? So that's.
I mean, isn't Canada a state of the United States? I thought.
I thought it was the other way around.
It's that small state territory between Alaska and the United States.
Gotcha.
I mean, Minnesota is part of Canada. It's like the DMZ.
But you did bring up a fantastic point, is that the more expensive these breaches become for companies, the more likely they're going to say, maybe we should start preventing this instead of just looking the other way.
Yeah.
All right, that's enough about the boring stuff.
Let's get to the good stuff.
Yeah, let's get to the good stuff. The whole reason why we brought Ron onto the show in the first place. So guess what, Chrome, we have another 0 day.
You keep using the word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
Again, Chrome, again. So you go ahead, Pascal.
I think in the light of Chrome, and this is just a little stab under the belt, in the light of Chrome, I think 0 day means there hasn't been 0 days without vulnerabilities for it.
Oh, but
every day we see something pop up on there. So I think people should just ditch Chrome and go back to Firefox, which is the better solution to do your web browsing anyway. But
Netscape, man, Netscape.
And the whole reason I don't want to get into the I don't want to get into the details of this 0 day, but the way they're using it is why I flagged this article, because they say there's a 0 day for Chrome, update now. And any security conscious person should jump off their chair right now and say, what the hell are you talking about? A 0 day and go patch? That's the absolute opposite of a 0 day. A 0 day means it's not even known to the company yet, right? A 0 day is undisclosed, is something that's broken inside a vulnerability that nobody, or at least the company, doesn't know about. And attackers are using it without anybody's knowledge. If there's a patch, it's not a 0 day.
So first of all, I think that there are some companies out there, some reports that are saying it properly. They're saying former 0 day, and that's how they should be addressing it. And when they put out the alert, is say that this is a former 0 day, not that it's a 0 day. And then I guess you kind of described it. You want to describe a little, basically what 0 day means for those viewers that don't know, just in case.
Maybe we'll let Ron say that.
Yeah, Ron, you want to explain that?
Yeah,
It's your department. You're the 0 day guy.
And he's got all the intelligent words on top of that.
Yeah. I mean, in fact, we have, like right here, we have the Dread Pirate Roberts. We have Fezzik. That's me. And then we have, so I guess it's kind of, well, no, there's 4 characters there. We have to get a 4th. Anyway, go ahead, Ron.
Well, I think Pascal nailed it. I mean, these are former 0 days, right? A 0 day means you didn't know about it. So the whole fact that you're publishing on it,
Pascal,
negotiate. Oh yeah, exactly. So it doesn't. It's a chicken before the egg thing, and people are just using words that they don't understand.
Yep.
Because it's caught traction in almost all of the educational textbooks, right? 0 day is something everyone understands.
It's not a buzzword that people like to throw out. It
should be piss poor engineering. That's what it should be.
That's what it probably should be called, and especially when you're in the news almost every week with 0 days.
Whether I was going to mention
real 0 days or not.
Yeah, I was going to mention that if you just go and you Google, Chrome 0 days vulnerabilities, whatever, I mean, you'll see they just had one 2 months ago, and there's another one a few months before that. It's Chrome. They should change Chrome should change its name to the 0 day browser. So and I just wanted to point that out. I think it was, that was a big one, and it was something Pascal wanted to talk about, but we didn't want to spend that much time on it. And we wanted to talk about the fact that, kind of introduce 0 days, but we got some other things that are former 0 days. And I mean, when you really get down to it, quite frankly, every vulnerability is a former 0 day. But
yes, until it gets found, it's a 0 day.
So, or until they report it or whatever. But so we brought Ron on to talk about some vulnerability research and some CISA advisories or the ICE. Is it ICS CERT or is it CISA now? I know it's CISA, but they're still reporting it as ICS CERT advisories. What is it exactly?
A non-transparent organization.
That's a completely different name again.
It's the government. All right. So we, there's one that we flagged, and it was actually news last week, and we can talk about some of the code assist software vulnerabilities if you want to talk about that, or we can just go straight to we can go straight to the vulnerabilities that you flagged and wanted to talk about. Your choice. You kind of lead us here and where we're going to go and talk about.
We're just going to sit back, turn off our mic, and we'll leave it up to you. Whatever you want to talk about. It's your show now.
Play with your dog.
Well,
that's not a euphemism, by the way, or is it?
Yeah. Well, your dog, my dog is dead in French, which kind of means that you lost your chances on a date. That's an expression up here, but I think we can start with the CodeSys ones because I mean we're no stranger to CodeSys. It's like it's actually like the founding case for having SBOMs because nobody knows that CodeSys is in half their products and they don't care.
Yeah, and I mean in this particular report, there were 10 different vulnerabilities that all had a major rating of critical or high severity in the CVSS rating. Now, of course, that's the CVSS rating, which is not particular to industrial. Of course, we'll be fixing that in the coming weeks with the IVSS, the Industrial Vulnerability Scoring System. But for now, they're still high critical and high severity. And they rated anywhere from just DOS attacks, but remote code execution. And again, we talked about the remote code execution last week.
We did with the Siemens stuff. And once again, I'm going to point out, there's a vulnerability in the web server in there. A lot of companies, including Rockwell, Siemens, and many more, have had issues with their web server built-in. So once again, we see it. And once again, these type of services are being enabled out of the box. If you absolutely have to have that code in there, at least turn it off until we want it, which most people in our industry, they don't care.
No, it's not even the asset owner. It's the integrators that do the deployments that are their scope says just deploy X amount of PLCs and make the lights blink. So they do make the lights blink, and the password's probably organization 123, and maybe they tell you a note to reset it. But you and I both know that that's not the case.
Yeah.
So Ron, tell us what the CodeAssist software does specifically. What is it for?
Well, CodeAssist is both a platform and it's also an operating system at the same time. Kind of like when people say Linux, what does it really mean when they say Linux? Are they talking about the ecosystem or are they talking about the kernel itself, right? And that's an important distinction. In this particular case, some of the vulnerabilities were related to the communications that speak to the real-time operating system that's on those devices or to a component in their stacks. In this case, a lot of it was like the web servers. Some of them are just in the handling of some of the CodeSys protocol going across. And then some are just the way that they're handling the resources for the real-time operating system. In this case...
That's resources for you American speakers.
Thanks, I needed that.
You also want a project with your procedure?
Yeah, project with the procedure, with the resources, and there was a couple other ones in there that we need to train. I need to have a closed captioning in here, or the closed captioning, or for the subtitles. That's what I need. I need the subtitles at the bottom here. I'm using my mouse, like the viewers can see the mouse.
If nothing else, we need to do a transcript after this because we need to translate some of these English words into English.
My favorite is Canadian bacon or ham. Canadian bacon or ham. Anyway,
it's ham.
Artifact with an E. That's the best way to spell it. It sounds more arcane and also
center with R&E reverse. Anyway, all right, we're getting off track. Keep going, Ron. Sorry about that.
Yeah. So I think what's interesting though is kind of when you look at the CodeSys thing, right? If you look at the whole CVE system, and someone's gonna, Dale Peterson, all these guys keep talking about how CVEs and all these new systems are gonna fix everything. The fundamental problem is not necessarily the scoring. I'm totally ignoring that whole thing because that's a whole discussion. The fact is vulnerabilities are never possibly ever to be matched to a product in the real world because the CPE points to CodeSys and you have a Beckwith controller. So unless your asset management system and your scanners know that there's some weird relationship, which probably not, and you as an asset owner will definitely not know that. All of this stuff, even if you did a new scoring mechanism or a new system, you'll never find it in your assets anyways, unless you're spending a ton of research and a ton of effort at it. Now, hopefully technologies are coming out to make that transparent to the end user, but that is a nasty, nasty thing. And CodeSys, if let's say Beckoff goes to fix it, well, there's also another problem there is that if you have a business relationship for the real-time operating system for CodeSys, right? You have a license for it, and the other vendor doesn't. and they haven't paid for it, you're more likely to get the patch and to put it into your product, and the other guy will not. So there's a lot of challenges there too, and they look left to right to see who's actually publishing, and if they're not, if nobody publishes vulnerabilities, then I won't either. And that's another political thing there, and that's why I said CISA it's not a transparent organization. That's true of almost all the certs. This is a voluntary system that has no obligations to the vendors nor to you as the asset owners, and that's also a complete failure of the system.
Be careful what you say about CISA, man. You're going to get the drones. You're going to get the drones. All right.
I like them, but they have a 40-page report of mine that I submitted in January with the vendor, and I had to get CISA to back up on, and they still haven't published it, so I'm not thrilled.
Well, I think we can all agree we all miss Chris Krebs. So let's move on to some of the ones that you flagged and you wanted to talk about, because you had some choice words for some of these. So one of the first ones is these are recent advisories. The ICSA 21-159-06 hut. All right. Anyway, but why don't you talk about some of these that you had some really good things to say? Sure. as in not good things to say.
I'll ask this from the audience. If we could do a poll, I would say who actually knows what Sentinel is.
You can ask for in the chats. We don't have the ability to do a poll here because this isn't this is streaming software, not webcast software. And
all right, well,
we're wonderful audience, but you can ask people in the
wonderful audience. Put thumbs up or put comments if you know what Sentinel is without Googling it. Dum, dum, dum.
Weren't those the Blade Runner things? No, those weren't Sentinels, were they? No, Sentinels were the Matrix. Sorry.
Yep, that's right. They were. So Sentinel got bought, Thales, but if you go back into time, it comes up as all of those wonderful Gemalto USB license dongles. And if you go back even farther, those were Aladdin keys. And if you go back farther, it was SafeNet keys. And if you go back and you go back and you go back, every single vendor has this product. But this particular vulnerability is great because it actually breaks the file system, breaks the Windows firewall by punching in rules for it and even allowing it to go further than that. So this one's a really nasty component-based vulnerability that's really going to drive you crazy. And guess what? You're not going to see any vendor updates for it. So that one's a beauty.
I told you this guy was good. He knows pretty much all the stuff about all the background, all these, and you even found some of these. Let's disclose that too. You are a vulnerability researcher. You found some of these that got published or haven't been published yet in these advisories, right? Not these ones we're talking about today. I don't think so. If you found any of these, let us know. But I know that there's vulnerabilities that are in the queue that you found.
Yep, and then there's also recently, if people were following, there was a bunch of vulnerabilities that were all published in the same group. So some are probably going to be overlapping each other, but I was on the GEUR relay vulnerability release a month or two back. And that was with the likes of INL, Idaho National Labs, and some of the other groups and friends. And we found some really, really nasty stuff in the critical infrastructure for the relays. And some of them actually were vulnerabilities related to a fix that they'd already done or not done. And there was a whole collage there. So yeah, I generally try not to necessarily publish vulnerabilities unless it's important. I don't like having a CV count. It's not a claim to fame. I prefer working with the asset owners and working with the vendors to actually try and remediate these problems and explain to them security is not an expensive thing. It's expensive when you don't do it right the first time. And that's what I try to build better relationships with. And for those of you that are doing research on vulnerabilities, please don't be like a certain vendor that brands all their vulnerabilities and scares the bejesus out of all of the CISOs. That's not how you should do this, because it actually overwhelms people into basically throwing their hands up, or it creates a fire sale, and there doesn't need to be one.
So that's the second time I've heard that word today, fire sale. Literally, to create a fire. This looks like, and I'm not joking. I'm dead serious. The first time I heard that today, my mom used the word earlier. I was talking to my mom earlier, and she said something about fire sale.
Get her on. Maybe she could say something intelligent about this too then.
That would be dangerous to me. So this vulnerability here, it's only a 3.96 on the CVSS Richter scale, but it does break your firewall.
And that's what I was wondering. Why is this touching your firewall to begin with? This is software to make you to make your software run, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's to get a license key installed or configured or up to date on your system. Why is it even touching the firewall? Good question. Right?
License server, probably the part of the license server for the RTE. I'm assuming.
Yeah.
It would make sense.
As a convenience to make it work, right? Instead of you having to shut down your firewall yourself, this does it for you.
Yeah, it's convenient. It says, when you start the installer, hey, if you want to go back even farther and see where this could even go wrong, well, look at FlexEra and all the issues. It's going to execute it as root administrator, whatever, and do all this wonderful stuff for you, and you're never going to get a prompt. It's beautiful.
This is the reason why a lot of this industrial software still needs to run with admin privileges as well, because they want to be convenient for everybody.
Yeah. This is also
or you're running as
nice
raw
things in ICS.
And it's raw sockets. So you're trying to catch stuff that's layer 2 versus layer 3, and you don't want to set up a server. That's often another piece of it too, right? There's a lot of redundancy protocols and drivers that need to run as root. And there's actually been very little research into that. So that if someone's looking for an aspiring adventure, you could probably have some good times with that versus just poking at software and looking for things like path traversals and easy things to go find with a fuzzer. They could go do something meaningful that would actually result in a better industry.
So what would you consider meaningful?
Ooh, very good question. Well, I would like to have my coffee beans. I would like to have my gasoline. I'd like to have all those things on a regular basis and not worry about them. Meaningful things are trying to meaningful.
Meat. No, we need
meat.
I gotta have
period. Meat, steak.
Yeah, just meat.
Sausage.
Meat. No. Anyway, all right. But just meaning. What would be a meaningful vulnerability? What would be when people are looking for vulnerabilities? What would you consider? Okay, these are meaningful. This is what we want to know.
So there's like forever days, right? So those are things that are insecure by design. If you report that a device has telnet, yes, telnet is broken, and yes, it has insecure passwords, but it's not actually a problem that the password goes by in clear text until someone transmits it. So if that's never occurring or the service is disabled, yes, that is a vulnerability in the device. It's a risk, but so is the same as driving a front-wheel drive car with summer tires in the winter in Canada. It's not really a big deal unless it's actually being actively, it's in a place where it's exposed. A real vulnerability would be something like if you connect to that device 10 times and the device only had a connection pool of 9 connections and you connect it on the 10th time and it starts overwriting the first connection and killing off other ones, that's a meaningful vulnerability to find because that affects what I call, and other people have coined, the SRP of that device or that product, safety, reliability, and productivity. That's a very meaningful thing to me because it's, telnet is bad, and I know that will always be there. But I want the device to be stable, right? And I know Pascal would say that he's on site. He wants to, he knows that the software is maybe not the best or whatever, but he's going to apply compensating controls to manage that. But something like resource consumption is a totally different ball game because you don't want someone to both accidentally cause a problem with it, someone to port scan and cause another problem with it. There's a bunch of things there. That's a meaningful vulnerability. Yes, remote code executions and those things are very important and very very neat. But the things that fundamentally can help prevent accidental shutdowns or halts, those are really important.
Yeah, exactly. So, remote code execution is going to be meaningful if it's allowing you to bypass certain logic and safety protocols, right? And things like that. But ultimately, meaningful is anything that can halt or damage a process, right?
I think environmental or at least the situation these devices are in, it probably plays it into play, right? You can have the most elaborate RCE vulnerability that if it's exploited, you can take down the PLC, you can do whatever you want with it. But if that PLC is designed to sit on its own network or not even connected to a network, then who cares at that point? If you can't get to the PLC, okay, there's a vulnerability on it, but nobody can get to it. So maybe the environment, the situation that device is in needs to be taken in consideration as well.
Yeah, and
let's move on to the next one real quick.
Yeah, sure.
Go ahead, Ron. What your analogy?
Okay, I was going to say I have an analogy for that, and I mentioned front-wheel drive cars in the winter. So when you
we don't get that. Here in Texas, I don't get that joke in Texas.
Oh, you did after this winter.
Touche, touche.
But I look at it like this: when you go buy a cheap front wheel drive car, you whether or not you acknowledge it or not, you bought a car that is not good for driving in slippery conditions. It's a front wheel drive car. And so when winter comes crawling around in Canada, what you need to consider in those perspectives is I have a couple choices there to reduce my risk. And that's what Pascal was talking about, environment. I can choose to leave my car in its parking spot buried under, I was going to say a meter, but let's say a yard of snow. And I can choose to keep it there. I have other choices to reduce my risk, like putting good winter tires on it, driving slow, driving only on cleared bus routes, keeping it in the garage. Those are all choices that I can choose to make, and that also will affect the vulnerability score of a vulnerability, how I would prioritize it, how I would remediate, or I would just accept it because front wheel drive cars are poor in the snow, so I'm going to leave it in my parking spot until the snow is melted or the roads are clear. Those are decisions that you as the asset owner will actually have to take. Vulnerability should not dictate your business. Your business should dictate how you handle the vulnerabilities.
Yep. So
Awesome.
I completely agree with that, but I'm going to correct you in one little thing. Front wheel drive cars by default are much better in snow. If you put summer tires on there.
Uh-oh. We got a
Ooh.
Canadian arguing with a Dutchman about snow.
I prefer an all-wheel drive car, but those get weird too. They plow corners. They start with oversteer, then they plow.
If you had to choose between rear and front wheel drive, you take front wheel drive. Four wheel, of course, I'll agree with you that four wheel would be the way to go. But if you have to choose between rear and front is still better.
All right, let's move on to our next one, guys.
The tree that you're going to hit, for sure.
All right, let's move on to this next one here. And this one, Ron had a few choice words to say. This is Siemens based, right? And I'll let you just talk about this one for a minute there, Ron. It's still it's not critical, but it's it's not much higher. It's a little bit, a tenth of a point higher. So I would say that. Oh, never mind. I misread that earlier. By the way, my bad eyes and glasses. It's CVSS version 3. That's a 7.4. The last one was a 9.6. So I apologize for that. This one is a critical one. This one is high. It's 9.6. Something about that score.
I would say so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Opening up your firewall.
Yeah. So I stand corrected there. But so on this one, this is a little bit lower, 7.4. But I think.
Is this the one that came from Clarity? Sorry for interrupting, but is this the one that came from Clarity?
No. This was another one. This was talking about the kernel and the stack.
Okay.
So what I find interesting. Go ahead, Clint. Sorry.
No, I was going to say, do we actually have remote code execution here? Nope. Yeah. So tell us about this one. What's going on here?
So when I see the word Linux-based products, what that means to me is I've seen Siemens kludge together a product and never maintain it ever. That's what that means. And I'm Siemens, please don't get mad at me. I think you're a great company and make good products. Same with the other vendors. I'm not picking on one in particular. But this is true for Internet of Trash as well. But when I see the words Linux and someone saying that if how IP tables is handling it, it doesn't say IP tables, but actually that's what that advisory is telling me. That means that this Linux kernel and this product is probably 8 to 10 years old. I call that vulnerability advisory an indicator of garbage in IOG, and it stinks, which tells me if I went back and I found out what version of Linux kernel it is, and it's probably 2.6.26 or 2.6 something old, that's going to tell me there's over 400 vulnerabilities potentially in that kernel or that file system that are also going to be present. So it's not only one there. So that's one problem. The other thing about this advisory that I always laugh at is when it says Linux vulnerability, you go and check the NVD entry for the CVE, and guess what? Siemens is nowhere to be found. Now, what's also conflicting again is that when you report advisories, if you report a relation like a product and a component, if it's not first-party code, it actually shouldn't be actually posted by CISA. That's their official policy. But in this case, the vendor is talking about a third-party component, and it's getting published as advisory under name, and there's no matching and collaboration between all the NVD or the CVE details and the advisory itself. So that one in particular also demonstrates another failure. And sorry, Dale Peterson, vulnerabilities are only, and the reports are only as good as the information in them. So if you get garbage, or if you give garbage into the system, you will get garbage back. And in this case,
Garbage
this
in, garbage
vulnerability
out.
would slip out.
Right? Garbage in, garbage out. It's
Yeah.
just, I was wondering while you were explaining that, is this because they're trying to save face? They're trying to hide their name in this vulnerability a little bit so they don't get dragged through the mud?
Could be. I mean, I would rather you post it and saying we use Linux in a product. And as we go to Internet of Things, you're going to see tons of third-party code. And guess what? If you ever see updates and you know what's in them, for only the vendor's code ever gets updated. The rest of the file system, the board support package, very rarely ever has an update in it, except for maybe OpenSSL or something like that. That's like the only things that get updated. I hate to tell you. So even if your product says we frequently update, no, it's actually not. It's just the first party, the vendor code that's getting updated for your pleasure. So this one's a bit complicated. Now, I'm no lawyer, and I suspect I would not want to say or provide some sort of guarantee and claim as to why you might not claim something. But I suspect there might be a legal reason in there as well. Oh yeah, Ambrose is correct. Is it like Cisco CVSS? Absolutely. I would definitely call out Rockwell Stratixes. They're almost, a lot of the firmwares are almost bit for bit the same. Yep. But generally what I do is, well, I actually have friends working on this there at Adolis with Eric Byers. They're actually grabbing the Cisco information and cross-referencing it to the Rockwell stuff. And because there's a correlation, you can prove with a high probability that one vulnerability is in the other. So that's something very interesting to take back. And also it gives you lots of good ammo to fire back at your vendor or your account rep and say, what is this nonsense? The more people that do that, the better our world's going to be.
Well, we got another one here.
Yeah, he sent a whole list over. He's been busy.
Yeah. So this one is Rockwell. Our friends at Rockwell. Pascal knows a little bit about that.
I've been around the block once or twice with them.
So this one's in between the last two. This one is in 8.5. What's going on with this one, Ron?
This is another beauty. So someone's tried to tack on logic that does authentications. And they were trying to tack on logic that does authentication based on a computer's name. Now, this sounds like a beautiful piece of outsourcing where the programmers literally wrote code to the requirements, which said only allow this computer with this name. So if someone says my NetBIOS add name as ABC computer in the plant, it will automatically accept it. This again shows a fundamental problem, is that the programmers and engineers or whoever's architecting and double checking all of this stuff, they're not doing their job. And if I looked at almost all the vulnerabilities, 80% of them are from poor engineering, and they should have been caught. This is another one there that should have stood out to everybody. But this one would be very hard to find with fuzzing, just because it's more business logic related. It's not, for example, looking for other things like, does the stack crash? This one would be a little bit harder to find, but you'd have to use a little bit of intelligence.
So is the vulnerability actually the fact that I can change my computer name and get allowed into it, or is there something else?
No, it's exactly as you just said.
And the reason I'm asking is that I've run into this many times where you try to get onto your PLC, or you try to get onto the services. You might try to open up your control logics program. It says this computer is not in the services domain, right? In the factory talk services domain. And then most of the time people will just go in and disable it and said don't require a computer name for every single user. So, yeah.
It's a beauty. It's a beauty. It shows another one. Now, there's probably a secondary mechanism there that would be like not on top of the domain, but there's some other authentication strategies there. But chances are nobody has those other ones. Like go call up the Radius server and see if you have authentication. Nobody in OT really that I know has a Radius server kicking around. They'll have an AD server for the most part, but Radius and those other.
Working.
Yeah, exactly. So then, it's wide open, game changing, or it's like people. You think that you've got Mac filtering, but guess what? Some certain Schweitzer gateway devices allow Mac cloning. And so people wander around your network with Schweitzer relays or with gateway devices just by cloning Macs to get past all of your Mac filtering on your ports. There's a lot of tricks.
Linux allows Mac cloning, changing right from the kernel. So,
well, guys, we are coming up to the end of our 45 minutes already. Can you believe that? Time flies when you're with Ron. So before we head on out, let's give we didn't really actually give Ron a full introduction of who he is and everything like that. We just said he's a Canadian that hacks stuff and deserves his own Adam
That should
McKay
be enough. How many
TV
of those
show.
are there
Yeah.
in Canada?
So real quick, so he is from Verve Industrial. Why don't you tell us what you do over there at Verve? I've known these guys for a long time, and you know, I don't know if John Livingston is a relative of Ron Livingston, but I know he's cooler. And Rick Kahn, I've known Rick for a long time, and so I'm just going to continue to name drop, but I'm actually calling you guys out because I appreciate what you do over there. But what do you know? And you came on. I don't know how long you've been there. What do you do over there?
I'm coming on 3 years, I think now.
Yep.
I haven't double checked. Time flies. But no, I'm the director of cybersecurity insights, which is a huge title because they didn't know what to call me at first. They could have called me cybersecurity of Canada. I don't know what they would have called me, but when I go down to Maryland, they call me the Canadian spy. So what can I say? What I do is a whole bunch of things. So one is I try to be pragmatic on all of the things I write and what I post about, even my research. I try to be as pragmatic as possible because I need to put myself into the shoes of the asset owners. Asset owners are not geeks. So that translates into how do I deliver my message and go about my research. I try to talk about everything procedurally. If you saw my SANS presentation on reverse engineering RTUs, you know exactly about what my strategy is and how I think. So one of the parts that I do is the research. The other is I do assessments, and then I help the product overall. And I even go and help work with customers directly on site or even at the executive level. So that's what I do. What about sell a product and do services?
That's what I was going to ask you about, the product. So what does Verve do?
Well, Verve is they've been around for a long time. They've been around for 25 odd years. They started off as a systems integrator. And about 5-7 years ago, they started to build a product that actively communicates with products, such as PLCs, and does asset inventorying. So we get detailed inventorying information. Guess what? We were doing it long before all of the other vendors were. But we do it with multiple ways. You can go about it from a file-based approach or from projects like PAS does, but that's very insufficient because they never match reality. And then the other aspect of it is you could be passive, but that's not what we do. We communicate to the devices in their native protocols because we have them all in their labs and we've worked on most of them.
To this day, I still hold to the fact that Rick Kahn coined the phrase native detection as an in-between to passive and active detection. I'm giving Rick credit for that.
Yeah, Rick definitely did. And it's the way that it's done is quite and very, very safe. We wouldn't touch a device unless we trusted it. And because, I mean, after all, nobody wants to be indemnified, such as a certain vendor flooding a network and killing a soda beverage bottling facility. For those of you that know who that is.
Or toilet paper. Anyway.
Yeah, I'm not saying who it is, but someone did it by flooding their network. So we're very different than everyone else. So we try to apply all of those things in there and doing it right. And so that's what we do. We focus on the customer. We even do controls upgrades for their DCSs. We do it all as well as assessments. So we're kind of an all-in-one shop, but most of our business is done through the product deployment and also helping the customer own it, which is the operational part that most product vendors fail at miserably.
And I think that's a good conclusion. You guys do it all. And Ron, Brash, thanks for being on the show. You do it all as well. We appreciate you and what you do. And we'll see you thanks for being on the show. And Pascal, whatever, you can be here or not next time. Just figure out somewhere to go besides Alaska, and we'll figure it out.
I'll be home probably.
You'll be home for Christmas. Anyway, all right.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's absolutely for sure.
And that's the end today. We'll see you next week. And we have another guest on next week. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Ron. Thank you, Pascal. And we'll see everybody next time.
Woo!